All right. Hello, everyone. So just with a raise of hands, who is already involved in DAO or, is leading a DAO? Okay, amazing. Okay.
I thought the previous talk was very helpful, actually. So, quick round of introductions. My name is Fabio Franca. I started Blueverse Ventures, which is a venture capital firm focusing on the metaverse, and the metaverse being the intersection between immersive computing and Web3. Within Web3, we look at blockchain gaming, but also other type of companies and sectors. The investment thesis, if you like, is a bit of a 3D Venn diagram where we look at creator economy, discovery and experiences as verticals, and within those verticals we look at the technological layers of architecture / infrastructure, which is your Web3, your protocols, then the monetization layer, that's your NFTs, your wallets, and then the interface layer, that's basically the consumer interface. Could be a game, can be a fashion show, anything. So for us, DAOs and NFTs in DAOs are at the edge of the thesis, but we invested in 3 businesses, 2 of which are blockchain games, very early on, so I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point.
Great. Daniel?
Thank you. I'm Daniel. I come from a background in organization design and governance, system design, and so on, so I was in this topic long before it was DAOs. Then in Web3, I've been head of governance at Aragon, and then about a year ago, we started our NDAO, which is a research DAO. We research DAO operations and DAO governance challenges, and then sometimes turn some of those into products. So we're a R&D studio, or if you like, a venture studio, developing different solutions for DAO tooling.
So I'm the co-founder of Lomads, which is building tools for DAOs, or rather sort of DAOs. And what we are really looking at is to capture the flow of either capital or the flow of sweat. You are either contributing, sweat equity, or you're deploying capital to initiatives which bring value. Because just like Facebook groups, Web3, it has really democratized DAOs, and there are going to be millions of DAOs. And you won't have MBAs running these organizations ensuring financial stability. So you have to make tools which actually make it super easy to really understand what's of value and what's not. And that's what we are trying to do at Lomads. So let's now open the floor, to the discussion. So Daniel, what do you think NFT? Earlier there were DAOs for NFTs, for selling NFTs, and now we have flipped that to have NFTs for DAOs. Okay, so what is so special about NFTs?
Yeah, so for me, it's a complicated history. Where, as you're saying, first there was all of these communities, they issue NFTs, and then they are like, oh, turns out that we need to coordinate how do we do that, and so they end up becoming a DAO unexpectedly and having to face all of those challenges. Well, they thought they would just hang out and make money, or do whatever it is that the community was about. And where it's now getting is that it also coincides with a challenge that ERC20 based smart contract governance was discovering. That is like, okay, you have all of these other tokens that are fungible, they're very easy to trade, and so on, which means that it was also very easy to start creating different protocols that allowed someone to raise temporarily, to accumulate a big amount of these tokens, get a loan or something like that, the flash loans that we had at first that were one of the big attack vectors. And then with the bribing protocols or lending protocols, things like Paladin and so on, you could actually very easily accumulate all of these tokens and attack a DAO, and very easily pass proposals through a DAO and so on, and that way capture it for your interest at the detriment of the community at large. So when the NFTs come along and they're a lot less fluid, a lot less liquid in the market, actually provides a solution for the definancialization of governance that now has a bunch of other properties on top, the metadata and so on. But essentially, it was kind of like the first implementation of something that people were theorizing for a while ago that was maybe moving towards more human-based models as opposed to capital holding-based models. So instead of how many tokens I have, it could be a little bit more towards each person can have one vote. Each person can have one NFT. So in a brutal space like Web3, where it's anonymous, permissionless, and so on, the NFTs came as a solution for that. And that was kind of like a first wave of adoption. But now we are into a new territory where we have all kind of communities experimenting with many different models of governance. And now there are different solutions to solve that. So whether NFTs are going to remain the core primitive for governance or not is yet to be seen. But they are certainly gaining a lot of traction as a solution to the financialization governance challenge.
Wow, that was a great outline, actually. Fabio, do you have any thoughts coming on that?
Well, going back to gaming and how we look at it from an investor's perspective, we see lots of Web2 veterans, gaming veterans, coming into the space, and the governance in a game comes from the players having a little bit more ownership and a little bit more control. So the challenge, one of the challenges which we saw from the previous presentations, is how much do you put in the DAO, i.e. how much decentralization do you allow, and how much ownership and control do you give to the players, and how do you correlate that with the gameplay and the game mechanics? I mean, the most important thing for a game is the gameplay. So how do you apply governance principles on those game mechanics? So, and because the gamers, some gamers, we have a very experienced crowd, across the conference, but most of the players don't really know why they would like more ownership or more control. So from 0 to 100, where do you put the cursor? How much did you give away? And the previous presentation, he actually mentioned ephemeral DAOs, and I think that's quite a good way to get started with the drawbacks. But a pop-up DAO could be a good way to start applying some principles of giving away some ownership and controls, knowing that you have developers. And the challenge is that it's a bit of a conundrum. You have developers, and then you have the gamers, and then you have investors having potentially conflicting objectives. Obviously, an investor, not necessarily venture capital, but someone buying NFTs in governance to have a bigger vote, and then it's a right to power. It's a price for power. It's like, okay, I'm going to imprint my power and my governance on those games, but what else can be given away? And it's a trade-off, and there is no conclusion. There is no perfect formula. It's really a discussion, and I've been part of these conversations, mostly listening, and I'm like, wow, But it's like, okay, you have the Web2 veteran saying, this is how we're thinking a good game should look like and should be played. How much are we giving away in terms of control and publishing rights, if you will, or publishing development rights to the gamers?
I think very interesting point of view, and they are like slightly different, and let me elaborate on that. While Daniel spoke about NFTs being attached to individuals, which solves the problem of civil attack, and one person, one vote and stuff. What Fabio has underlined is about supporting of projects, whether it's gaming and or it could be even other creative projects, and that's very interesting. I mean, like when you really attach it to individual, it can go on the side of soul-bound tokens, and there are certain use cases where you really want to capture like that your contribution is your contribution, to the DAO, and it should be counted. That's one, and this one is more about the financial contributions, like a share in the company, a stake in building what's being built, and it can stay transferable as well. So it's a very interesting way, and what makes these NFTs more versatile than usual coins is that you can really record the rights and access in them. You can really record the sweat contribution, if you have a reputation system, for different things that you are doing within a DAO. Let's say if you have voted in a proposal, if you have completed a project milestone, if you have finished the task, you can really assign value to these different things being done within the organization, and you can really map it into an individual's NFT, which can over time give them higher rights and access in the organization. So you can start off as a contributor and rise up to become a core contributor who has more rights in the organization. Now, I would make a hybrid model between what Fabio was saying versus the capture of reputation. So, in some DAOs, you might have a scenario where the financial skin in the game also matters. So you have kind of supported the project. So you were an early investor in the project, whether it's an NFT or the token case. And let's say you have been a developer who has been contributing and earning reputation, right? So you can assign a weight to that person within the organization, which is a function of your financial skin in the game and your sweat equity, if that makes sense, right? So sweat equity is by working, and the financial contribution is, what you bought, right? So let's take the discussion forward. Fabio, when I was talking to him, is in process of setting up a DAO. And I would really love to know the challenges that you are facing and what are you doing.
Yeah, well, the first challenge is to find a good lawyer or lawyers, because if you are based in the UK and want to decentralize your game, which lawyers are you talking to? So we spoke to a lot of lawyers, and eventually trying to work out the jurisdiction and the type of legal wrapper you'll put around your DAO. So there seems to be a bit of a consensus, depending on where the team is based and so on. But Wyoming was mentioned, Delaware was mentioned. Yeah, there can be solutions. If you're in the US, and also the US citizens, they have different tax regime. But safe to say that an association in Switzerland or foundation between Cayman and Singapore are probably the most. What we've seen the most. Now, there is confidential stuff I can't share, but have a good lawyer in the UK who understands, really the relationship between the tokens. And then we mentioned, we talked about governance tokens, but make this distinction between the digital assets, so the in-game asset, the in-game token, and then the governance token. There are two different tokens, and they have different, regimes and so on. But when you set up your association, what is the control at the board level? You don't want the founders to be legally responsible or liable unlimited with an unlimited liability. So we have to define the legal contour within the wrapper, and then where is the DAO, what is in the DAO, and then going back to your game mechanics and your roadmap. So you say, look, we are going to ship that version of a game. That version of game will have that correlated or associated governance tokenizations, and having those lawyers are critical. I think it's probably the biggest challenge. It takes a lot of time. The other challenge is the vesting of the tokens and the price of the tokens, and having a sensible allocation, and that can be a bit of a headache, and also identifying. Going back to the conflicting objectives, identifying the buyer of the tokens, what are they in it for, and what would their contribution be? That would decide your allocation, and it's a back and forth, it's a conversation. But how much decentralization do you have? At the beginning, you don't want to give away too much, so that's why a pop-up, an initiative, within the game, or having a time limitation could be good to trial and onboard everyone.
Thanks, that was great. So Daniel, do you want to talk about the governance of RNDAO? And are you already using NFT, or how NFTs possibly might be used?
Yeah, at the moment we're not using NFTs. We partially because one of the things we're doing is a research initiative, so we needed to have a mechanism that allows us to cycle through. Well, I think now we're at number 13, design of a governance system that we're trying out. So it's more a situation where we have a group that we trust very highly, and we're leveraging that trust to delay hard coding certain rules, whether it's hard coding them through a legal structure or hard coding them through smart contracts. So we're leveraging the trust. And obviously it's a risk. If things go wrong, there is nothing you can fall back on. And we had a couple of scares in that point where there was some tension in the team, and you're like, oof, okay, so if you're not going to do that, make sure at least you invest a lot in having good conflict resolution mediators and a lot in the culture and so on. But roughly the way we're now starting to stabilize a little bit more the design, and this has been very much an innovation challenge. We're not just trying to find, let's say, a structure that worked for someone else and just make it viable for us as a best practice, but we're actually trying to push the boundary a little bit and go further. And where we're going with that is a somewhat fractal structure, because we are a sort of venture studio or research agency. We have many different projects. And what we didn't want was that the funds for all of those different teams were allocated from some centralized place, whether that was community voting or a small committee that was elected or anything like that, because what that would make as a dynamic is that all of those teams will always be looking to that mechanism to serve them and make sure that whatever that mechanism was or was operating that mechanism, that they were very happy with them. And actually, we wanted those teams focus on the outside of the DAO, on creating value, because they're new ventures, new startups, so they need to really do that. So instead of getting funds from the central mechanism, they get mostly funds from the outside. We're now starting to think about the idea of having a match funding fund initially, that if they get funds from the outside, if they sell to a client or get a grant to develop a product or a solution, maybe they can get match funding, and that way we cover some of the cost. But then more importantly, evolving so that they can provide products and services to one another as a network. So let's say if you have to simplify it, if you have an HR team and a marketing team, if the marketing team needs to recruit someone, they can hire your HR team to do it. And they have a service level agreement between them. And that means that you don't need to decide as a centralized entity whether yours is the community or a committee again. You don't need to decide which of the two teams needs bigger budget. They're going to figure it out in between them based on the needs that they have and the value they're providing for the ecosystem. Then that does mean that every one of these teams needs its own governance structure. And that's where we've been cycling through so many things and have yet to find the perfect solution code-wise, but it's what we're working towards.
Oh, that's great. It's work in progress. Huh? That's going to be the case, you know. And it's a very, very important point. You know, DAOs really intimidate a lot of people. You think that, do I have to be a governance expert? Do I have to be a tokenomics expert to get started? I think let's simplify things. Just like individuals, DAOs also go through different stages of maturity, right? So if DAO was a bird, it could be hatchling, nestling, juvenile, adult. And so you don't have to just look at the biggest ones and think that, oh, I don't know anything about it. Should I start or not? No, you just get started, you know, and get your OG. And even if you don't have a token, even if you don't have a governance model, you know, you just start. The co-founders, the core teams, they will lead, do your social media and stuff, and just measure the sweat contribution, what I was saying. And as you figure things out along the way, you can reward people for their sweat contribution, which is where, again, the NFT comes into the picture. So I think it's a very, very important, I mean, their DAOs are doing hardcore stuff, you know, and so is his, you know, he's looking into all the legal aspects. So definitely you want to see, like, there are big ambitions involved, right? And you see that, like, all of us don't have everything figured out. So the key message here is that don't worry. You just get started. Take your a step with it, rather than just strategizing and you know, and reading tons of stuff. You know, ask first principle questions, and that's what, you know, I and Daniel was discussing. So Daniel started off his career in a Michelin star restaurant. And I was saying that, do you know, Daniel, like, how many varieties of tomatoes are there? I recently learned there are 300 varieties of tomatoes, okay? And so why it's important is to know that this DAO is just not one blob, you know? Over time, as we understand more and more about it, maybe we will have 200 types of DAOs. It's really about how granular look you are taking to it. But let's not try to understand all of them. But what's important here is to understand what is the purpose of your DAO. and what role will different kinds of stakeholders play there? And then you have to really ask, okay, what will work for me? So it's really about not being dazzled by just the definitions and theories about it. I think it's really about asking very, very fundamental questions about what is the purpose and all. One other application that comes to mind and about NFTs, bringing back the discussion here, is in Web3, a lot of people don't talk about good design. And burnout is real. That you get overwhelmed going from one Discord server to another and really finding out what's of value to you. Your NFTs can actually personalize your dashboard, or your SBTs can actually personalize your dashboard, because it has the data about, let's say, what role you play or how much, what tier you have in the DAO, or what's your sweat contribution, or what departments you are part of, And that is something which has to come. And here, you're not storing data like Facebook or Google, but your data remains stored in your NFT. So while you are providing data ownership, you are also personalizing the dashboard. So with that, we will be kind of closing the session. So if you want to follow Lomads, you can find us on Twitter, Lomads_CO. We are in closed beta, and I would love some of you to try it. The principle is really, don't worry, get started. Do you want to plug in about where people can find you, Daniel?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at _Daniel_Ospina, or to learn more about RNDAO, just RNDAO__ also on Twitter. Feel free to DM us. We're very open to chat.
And Fabio is the money guy, so he will also tell that and his thing, and then what kind of people he is most interested in talking to.
Yeah, it can be easily found. But as a conclusion, I would say be careful what you wish for with your governance. I mean, look at Twitter and imagine Twitter being set up as a DAO now. That would be very interesting to see what will happen and the challenges and so on. But the promise is huge. We as investors are very excited with this space. It's a beautiful marriage between finance and community and democratization, but it has to be done in stages and right. I think that would be my conclusion.
Thank you, guys. Great having you all here. Thank you. Bye.